Welcome. Good to see everybody here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making the effort to get here early on a blustery day. Hopefully it's worth your time. Us getting together this morning reminds me of those times in my life when I've been to see a really good movie, and when you finish, the movie makes you think, and then you want to tell your family about it and your colleagues about it, and you say, oh, you've really got to see that show, it's really worth seeing. Well, this week I was fortunate enough to attend the Higher Education Services Finance and Procurement Conference. They have an annual event, and I attended with Michelle, and we were both there. And the next thing, there was this Peter Geldenhuys chap from South Africa who was going to present, and I almost put my head down. I thought, oh, South African dude, what? I hope this is going to turn out okay. And partway through, Michelle and I were sitting next to each other, and oh, he's all right. This is actually quite good. And then before the presentation was over, we decided, with a bit of chit chat, not disturbing anybody, obviously, that gee, wouldn't it be good if we got this guy to come and present to UNE? So anyway, there was another speaker. Then after the break, I got up and I went and quickly spoke to Peter. Exchange credentials as South Africans, and I connect with the guy, and then found out and said, hey, do you do this? When are you next available? Oh, end of March. What about this week? Well, actually, anyway, one thing led to another, and we're privileged to have him come and talk to us this morning, so thanks for your time. He's got quite the credentials as far as being a futurist, and you would have seen from the email, he's connected with Geneva and all sorts of good places.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. I appreciate that. That was one of the more interesting introductions. Fortunately, I've got the microphone now for the next half an hour or so, we'll see what transpires. Good morning, my name is Peter Geldenhuys, and today I'm going to talk to you about a very interesting era that we're entering in the next 10 years or so. I entitled my presentation Business Unusual, but if we want to take a look at the future, there's about 5 constructs or areas of expertise that's quite important that we should focus on, and I'll touch on them. But let's set the theme for my presentation. If we take a look at the past, it's very interesting to note that whenever new technology is introduced into society, it takes us approximately 20 years to really realize what the impact of that will be on our environment. The older mindsets and patterns of thinking is so ingrained that technology doesn't actually drive us to harness it to its full potential. This is an interesting historical analogy. In 1880, we saw about 200 different patents for mechanical horses. So as the internal combustion engine came out, people thought, hey, that's a good idea. Let's put an engine in the horse because that draws the carry anyway. So you might think that 200 individuals might have a very interesting idea of the world, but if we take a look at the entire textile industry, it took the entire textile industry 20 years to change the layout of their plants after electricity was introduced. So traditionally you had a steam spindle that created a centralized source of energy, and all of the workstations were centered around the spindle. And then electricity came out, and electricity distributed power to where you needed it. And yet it took the industry 20 years, the entire industry, 20 years to realize they could change the layout of the plant. The interesting thing is we're in exactly the same movie right now. We're in an environment where we have supercomputers we wear in our pockets. We sometimes use them to make telephone calls. I think telephone calls is now the 5th most important thing, or the most time-consuming thing we do on our mobile devices. But these supercomputers is in our pockets. We're connected to the internet wherever we are. And we can distribute information at the click of a button, or find information at the click of a button. And yet, our business models haven't changed. So one of the key themes, and why I called it the cybersphere, is that there's something very interesting happening. In the past, we had real life, and then the internet came around, and there was a competition between the business models. And in some ways, the internet's business models trumped those that was available, because you could disintermediate and cut costs significantly. But what we're seeing right now is that there's a new environment emerging, where the internet and the real world is merging, becoming one. And as they start to overlap, it's not just the internet and real life. There's really a new construct forming. We call it the cybersphere. And that's where the internet and real life merges into one. And that is where an unbelievable amount of new possibilities starts to emerge. And that is going to be the focus of my talk today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what will happen in this interconnected space, but I also will shed some light on some of the thinking that leads us to it. So let's see where all of this is heading. If we want to talk about the future, there's a couple of things we need to realize. Firstly, the interconnected world, or the hyper-connected world, and how that changes the way we communicate. Secondly, we need to take a look at digital natives, and that means that our impact or our view on brain science is extremely important. How do we understand the human that uses modern technology? And if we don't understand how our human brain works, we'll never be able to effectively crack that nut. We also have to reframe our business models. Now that means that the value chain that you have, the normal value chain, will be ripped apart, unbundled, rebundled, in order to create higher value. And I'm going to give you about 10 examples of companies throughout the world that is doing that today. We also might have to focus on the world of complexity theory and complexity management, because social complexity is increasing. We also see that in the financial market. So we need to understand the very basics of complexity theory and ask ourselves, how does it apply to the world of management and economics? But if we have enough time, I'll touch on some of those elements. So that is going to be one of the focal areas. But if we want to talk about the future, there's an interesting saying by William Gibson. He said the future already happened. It's just unequally distributed. So I call myself a futurist, and when people come up to me and say, what will the future look like? I've got a stock standard answer. I'll tell them, I don't have a clue. They say, well, hold on a minute. What do you mean you don't have a clue? Isn't this what you do? I said, no, what I do is I talk about the future that could be, because I'll give you an idea about what is possible within this world of ours. What are the technologies and how will it change the way we work and how we interact with others? But once we realize what the future is and what it could be, then it's a very important lesson to learn that the future hasn't happened. The future is made up in someone's mind. An entrepreneur might think, oh, I'd like to see that in the future. And then, fascinatingly enough, the map becomes the landscape. So what we are seeing is that we're moving away from a future that could be to a decision that you make about this is what the future should be like. And that is about changing the rules of the game, changing the business models. And that really is what I focus on. What the future should be, I leave to the audience. I give them insight into what could be possible. So, without further ado, that is going to be the agenda. Who is above the age of 40? Generation X's and baby boomers. Above the age of 40. For you lucky individuals, I have created the agenda. So you'll be able to follow exactly what I'm on about. The first thing we're going to do is an introduction to the cybersphere. And then we're going to talk about why advertising is the cost of being boring. Very important in this world of ours. I'm going to talk a little bit about RFID tags and how it helps people in making sure they can run their organizations more efficiently. And then I'm going to bring in 5 change dimensions. That'll give us an insight into how we can measure the changes that we'll face. We'll talk about how we can reframe business and how we can prepare for the future. So that is going to be the agenda. Who's below the age of 40? 1, 2, 3 people. Now, I know I can't keep your attention for more than 5 minutes, so all I can do is I'm going to tell you stories. Yes, these are the stories I'm going to tell you. So these are some of the interesting things. In the very near future, you'll have your own TV channel, believe it or not. As you drive into work here in Armisdale, I think it's about 5 minutes, but nonetheless, you'll be able to play personalized music as you're driving in. So you'll tune on your radio station, but the songs that you listen to will be songs that you like, but you've never heard of before. And it will be completely different to what your neighbor's listening to. You'll be able to print an entire car on a 3D printer. How cool is that in evading state taxes? Huh? Or you can even print a gun on a 3D printer if you want to as well. We'll start seeing companies' brands getting a virtual dimension, and we're going to start seeing how the real and the virtual world merge into one. Are there any of these predictions you might feel a bit off color? Come on, you can't just believe everything I tell you, seeing that I come from South Africa.
Most of them are there already.
Yeah, completely right. Most of them are there already. So in my pocket, I have, or well, somewhere around, I have a little device called the iPhone. And on it, I have a little application called Quick, Q-I-K. And the moment I press that red button, I'm starting my very own TV broadcast. My wife, right now, in Somerset West in South Africa, I think she's sleeping right now. She's sleeping through most of my presentations, but nonetheless, the moment I press this button, I've got a live TV recording. So here goes. You are now live participants on Peter Geldnys TV. Welcome. Yes, you are now part of reality TV. Who would have thought 2 minutes ago? Unfortunately, my ratings are not very good. We've got no one watching us right now. That's quite concerning. We'll have to get something interesting out. Say something interesting or funny. Well, we'll try to get another. You know, I don't have a good track record on viewership figures anyway, so let's not worry about it too much. But the fact of the matter is, everything is changing around us. What is also interesting to note, and a couple of interesting metaphors, and I hope the sound isn't too loud on this one, but I can play music, and this is specifically for the baby boomers, you know, the guys that started out way ago. I'm starting a little application on my device called SoundHound. You all know it, most of you would. And I'm asking my device to identify the song. And there you go. It starts bada, 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 baba, baby, boo, boo. There you go. But anyway, nonetheless, the words have been identified. And what we did right now is to record the sights and the sounds that's available around us. And we connected it to a server in San Diego. And then we ensure that the information would then come back and enrich the environment in which I'm in right now. Now that's a very good metaphor of this world of the cybersphere, taking sights and sounds of what's happening right around me and converting it and making my life right now slightly more interesting. I can also utilize this device to translate things in real time. You must have used it by now. So I can say, oh, I really like the vibe in Australia, and then convert it into any language at the click of a button. And what's interesting to note is that most of the mobile devices, that was called near time, and that's been available for the last 5 years. Now the computing power in these devices is so fast that we can do it on a real-time basis. So if my South African accent might be a bit difficult for you to understand, you can actually do a real-time translation and have an Aussie accent superimposed on it. If you're really feeling lonely, there's also some wonderful apps. You know, they say there's an app for that. So no, I'm not talking about those apps. I'm talking about something slightly more off-color, but I know that Bruce said he's got a specific inclination to this one. It's one of his top 5. It's called the Glee app. And what it does is it logs on to any, so you've got a picture or a very good idea of what's happening around the world, and somewhere around the world, someone is busy with a karaoke. And you can actually connect to any of them and then listen to what they're singing and collaborate and so forth. So I know that Bruce is a big fan of that. So we're loading up on some geeks, and I'll give him the opportunity to actually hook up. There you go. There you go. You can join in if you want to. If you don't like it song, we'll just hook up to someone in Los Angeles. Maybe they've got something better going. You sure you don't want to participate? Now, nonetheless, what's interesting is I can use, within a few seconds, connect to anyone around the globe and do something stupid. Well, sorry, let's just kill this, participant or artist. What is interesting is you can connect to anything around the world based on your specific preference, but enrich your world in a way that wasn't possible before. And that's what these apps are doing. It allows us to contextualize our experience of the world out there. And